What's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of a Funko Popcast. I am DK Wrestler.
And I'm MD Shady.
And in today's podcast, we did a podcast that was titled Pops That Deserve More in Their Sets. And now we're basically going to be doing the complete opposite of that, since we kind of discussed about that on that pod, of basically Funko Pop sets that just have way too many, like unnecessary amounts of pops. And I mean, it could be sets, it could be technically individuals that have a lot of pops, but yeah, basically I have a bunch of sets listed down here. I have a bunch listed down in case MD has any that we basically will have the same of, because I'm sure there's got to be a couple that we have the same of on our list at some point. Like usual, I will start off with my list and then we'll go back and forth instead of doing all mine in a row and then MD's in a row. And then of course we will have the fan suggestions of what they think have too many pops, and we'll kind of agree or disagree with that. And then of course we will agree or disagree with what we mentioned. So of course, the first one that I am going to be discussing about is what pretty much started up this idea, at least in my opinion, is Dragon Ball Z / Dragon Ball Super. There is an ungodly amount of Funko Pops for that set. And I feel like, and I don't even have to look up a list of Dragon Ball Z and Super Pops, that like 60 or 70% is just either Goku or it's Vegeta. And it's not like here's a Goku and a Vegeta, and then there's like a couple of them from different moments. There's a lot of repeats where it's like, all right, now we're going to do like this moment, but it's got a red base, and this one's got a blue base now. Like we just got, I believe it was a Goku or Vegeta that's a box lunch exclusive, I think, that just has this blue base instead of a red base like we got for like San Diego Comic-Con or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of that, and I can't even think of any other Dragon Ball Z character that hasn't had a Funko Pop besides Goku, Vegeta, Cell, and possibly Piccolo. That's all I could really think of. There may be some other characters, but I can't think of off the top of my head though.
Yeah, basically to go off what you said with Dragon Ball Z, I also had Dragon Ball written down because, yeah, there's a lot of pops that are unnecessary, whether it's characters that people just don't care about or the abundance of different versions of Goku and Vegeta, whether it's eating noodles or just a normal pose, or if it's a Super Saiyan form, which there's a whole bunch of Super Saiyan forms. But then also I had mentioned that there is the Shenron Pops, which is the dragon from Dragon Ball Z, if you guys don't know that. And basically there's a few versions of that pop that are kind of unnecessary. You have the regular version, the metallic, the gold version, as well as the jade pop, which the jade one is actually kind of cool because it kind of looks like a statue, but it's kind of unnecessary to have 4 different versions, and there might even be more than that. There might even be a glow-in-the-dark one. But anyways, yeah, so I did have Dragon Ball Z, but the first list that I do have down here is Marvel. There is way too many Marvel pops. It makes sense. I mean, Marvel pops are most likely going to sell very well, but there's also some sets that don't sell very well, like the Zombies pops or the Venomized set, which I really, really despise. The abundance of Deadpools. There's so many Deadpools. I'm so sick of it. I'm glad that Funko hasn't been really pushing as many random Deadpools anymore. And then if I have the name right, the Mech Strike set, I think is what it was called. That set is just garbage for that video game, and they show up at like the dollar store now here in Canada, and just ridiculous. And even for normal Marvel pops, there's a lot. I mean, definitely a lot of versions of, let's say, Spider-Man, so they make a pop for every single version, but there's also some versions of Spider-Man that have multiple pops, and it's just a little unnecessary to have that many pops. And that goes for basically any character in Marvel. There's a ton of different Hulks, a ton of different Spider-Mans, Captain America, Iron Man. There's so many. Doing a new mold that looks better, I'm all for that, but when you have just too many of one single character, especially with Marvel, it just gets to be too much, and that's really why I don't collect a ton of Marvel pops to begin with.
Yeah, there's definitely quite a bit of Marvel sets. I actually did have a Marvel set specific one listed down, but I guess realistically, I don't need to mention it until maybe later. I don't exactly know. But yeah, Marvel does have a lot of unnecessary sets that just end up being on the shelves. One set that I listed down here is Pokemon. I feel there is a ton of Pokemon pops, and it's not just, okay, I get there's 151 of Gen 1, which I'm okay with, but when almost 20 of like I want to say 70 or 80 pops in the Pokemon set are just Pikachu, that's just a little bit ridiculous when you have regular Pikachu, dancing Pikachu or whatever it is, waving Pikachu, angry Pikachu, I'm the Raging Bull about to hit Johnny Knoxville Pikachu. Like there's just too many many Pikachu pops, and then you got the flocked version, the silver metallic version, diamond collection. It's just, it is too many Pikachus. And then especially the starters have a lot, because like Charmander and Bulbasaur and Squirtle have like those exact same things. There's a diamond collection of each of them, a flocked version. There's a metallic one, or at least for Charmander. I don't think they ever did that for Squirtle and the Bulbasaurs. But then also coming out soon is the pearlescent pops, which we got Pikachu so far, and we know that the starters will be getting their own. And then you got Mewtwo and Eevee, and then we're getting pumped out just so many other unnecessary pops, in my opinion. Especially like right now, we're getting some newer like non-Gen 1, even non-Gen 2 Pokemon pops that are being pumped out that like, okay, they kind of get us where we want more gens, but not those gens realistically. So it's like, did we really need those Pokemon pops? Not exactly.
Yeah, so I also had Pokemon on my list, and you named most of the reasons. I mean, with your Pikachus, your Eevees, your starter Pokemon, you have all those different variants. You named pretty much all of them. Also, the 10-inch pops and the 18-inch pop of Pikachu. It's just, there's too much. And to put it in perspective, if my numbers are correct, there's 95 Pokemon pops, and 37 of them are different Pokemon. So the rest is all just different variants of existing Pokemon with the 20-ish close to versions of Pikachu. And then there's also the multi-pack that was exclusive to Costco of Eevee with the 3 evolutions. And that's just unnecessary. You don't need that. We already have the singular pops. So yeah, Pokemon is definitely a set that has way too many pops, and for the wrong reason, because people want pops. I mean, we want Pokemon pops. We want all 151. But when you're getting different variations, like Sitting Pikachu, I think is one that you didn't talk about. There's way too many Pikachus, and I get it. Pikachu is a big seller for Pokemon and Funko. But at the same time, like, a lot of people probably don't say, hey, my favorite Pokemon's Pikachu. No, you probably have a favorite Pokemon, whether it's something like Charizard or Gengar or Greninja or Lucario, one of these Pokemon that is actually like a fan favorite type of Pokemon, where Pikachu is just the mascot. So I don't think we need to pump out that many Pikachu pops anymore, and maybe start focusing on like the first couple of gens rather than giving us stuff from Gen 8, which we've been seeing a little bit now, which is just crazy to me. I'd rather just see the original Pokemon first before we get into a ton of variants and all this stuff. And there's still no shiny Pokemon pops, which is just ridiculous. Maybe they want to save that, or maybe they have no intentions at all of doing it. But if they are going to give us a bunch of Funko Pops, let's see some shiny pops at least. And then the next set that I have is pop albums. And this is just because there's starting to get to be a lot of them. When this set was first announced for the pop albums, I was loving buying them. I have the first like 10, I think, that were made, and I have a few other ones other than that. But it feels like there's some albums that just don't really deserve to be turned into a pop album, especially if that band slash artist already has a pop album. I mean, we want to see a bunch of different albums, but I feel like they should probably just stick to getting new artists, getting them to have a pop album rather than just pushing out a bunch of different ones, like the Flash Gordon for Queen, for example. Like, is that really necessary when there's a lot better Queen albums that you could do in pop album form? So it's just weird that we get stuff like that. And then the deluxe albums are kind of a little bit of a cop-out. I mean, they're huge to begin with, so even just one of them is looking like a ton of pops. There's generally 3 to 5 different pops inside the deluxe albums, and a lot of the times they're not too much different than the pops we've already seen, if they are different at all. And I don't know, there's just they're just kind of weird, and they're producing them a little bit too fast with the albums I've been seeing. We're getting announcements for them, which seems like a couple a month almost at this point. And then there's also ones, like I said, with the deluxe albums that just don't make sense to be a deluxe album. And the example I have there is the Finger Bang South Park album, where you take the common pops that were just released, you throw them in this deluxe album, and it doesn't even really make sense, because like, I get it, it probably was made into a CD at some point back in the day, but I don't know, it's not like a real album in my opinion. It's not an artist, it's just from a TV show, so that doesn't make sense. And those are the reasons basically why I think that there's starting to get too many pops in the pop albums lineup.
Yeah, there are some artists that have too many pop albums. Actually, I want to mention one of my picks that I had. It actually would have been my next one, is that there was too many Notorious B.I.G. pops, which there are when you have OG. And then it was cool to see the remake in 2018 for NYCC. And then you ended up getting a gold jacket, a silver metallic one. And then what I wrote down was the fact that Notorious B.I.G., I believe, has 2 or 3 pop albums when we should be seeing artists get their first pop album. I mean, already we've seen, Notorious B.I.G., I believe Queen has 3, AC/DC has multiple. There's another one I can't think of off the top of my head that has multiple, but like there is a ton of artists that have multiple pop albums before a single artist even has one pop album. So like, the pop albums can be cool, but they can be annoying when people get multiples and it's albums that I feel don't deserve to get that recognition. Like if you had like not a studio album, but some sort of compilation album or possibly a live album of some sort. So there is a bit too much of the pop albums. And then this one I had listed down. Actually, this one I'm not going to mention because I feel like maybe you have it on your list, so I'm not going to mention. But this one I will, is the NBA lineup. So I was going to put sports in general, but I thought NBA out of all of them was kind of the worst of them because you don't really get that much of pose changes. I'm going to give like NFL credit where even the last couple of years, they've updated their molds to where they have like the grass bases and then you have a little bit of the throwing pose and they're getting a little bit better with that. And then with like hockey, they're getting a bit better with those, but like NBA, it just feels the same, especially when you release, I believe, only one wave a year and it's like the exact same pops in that wave. Like I remember one year you had like, what is it, like 7 different basketball players. And then for the following year, you get the same ones, except it's a different color jersey swap. Like that gets a bit boring, especially when it's the exact same pose and it's not different. And then over the years, we've gotten the abundance of Michael Jordan pops, which he has got to be 10 at this point. I'm not even exaggerating that number. I feel like that number is pretty accurate when you have regular Bulls, white jersey Bulls, black jersey Bulls, the All-Stars jerseys. And then there was like that blue All-Star. I can't remember what it was, but a different basketball, like Olympics thing. I think that was blue. Just like there's too many Michael Jordans. And then LeBron's getting up there, especially with that recent like 200-piece gold chrome one that's been surfacing up eBay and going up for like $7,000 in auction bids. So it's like the NBA lineup is kind of getting ridiculous, especially when you don't really want to give anyone new players.
Okay, and then the last set that I have, I guess, is Star Wars. Star Wars has way too many pops. It's just ridiculous. So starting off with the OG waves, you have the blue boxes and you have the black boxes. That right there is already too many. Why is there different boxes? I get it. It's a re-release, but that's just a lot, especially if you're trying to collect all of them. Like, let's say you wanted to get the blue and the black box for all the different Star Wars pops. Just ridiculous and not worth it, in my opinion. When I first started collecting Funko, I actually decided I wasn't really going to collect Star Wars that much because I do collect a ton of Star Wars stuff outside of collecting Funko. So I figured, why dabble in both? But I do have a decent amount of Star Wars pops, probably about 30 or so, if I had to guess. But there's a lot. Like, what do I have here in my notes? Darth Vader has a ton of pops, and DK knows about this. He collects Darth Vader and Darth Vader pops, and there's some now that he's passing on because it's like, do you really need this? And it's just getting too much. I mean, with your Lukes, your Leias, your Hans, Darth Vader, obviously, even Chewbacca, R2-D2, all these characters have a bunch of different versions that really aren't too much different from some of the other ones where, like, okay, it's cool when you get Luke and you have a couple different versions from A New Hope and then Empire Strikes Back and Jedi. So that's cool. I like that. But when they're starting to do pops that are the same as ones that they've already done, it just doesn't make sense, in my opinion. And then you also have like that 5-pack that we've seen for Star Wars Celebration. I believe it was last year where they put out single pops and the 5-pack. Get rid of the 5-pack or get rid of the singles. Do one or the other. Definitely don't need to produce both of them, in my opinion. And then the Mandalorian is basically the big one here too, because there's a abundance of Mando pops as well as Grogu has a ton of pops, and it makes sense. Grogu, the original, the child pop, I believe, is still the most sold Funko Pop of all time. So yeah, they're going to produce a bunch of Grogus, but none of them are too interesting from any other ones. It's cool. You do have some cute poses and stuff like that, or him doing some different things, but it's unnecessary. I mean, I could live with seeing like 5 different Grogus, and if I had to guess, there's probably at least 15 different Grogus. And then it's the same for Mando. I mean, there's a couple different cool versions where, like, let's say he has the Darksaber, or he has his rifle, or he has something going on, but some of them are very, very similar, and they don't really change at all besides, let's say, the item that he has in his hand, or maybe a little bit of a outfit change that isn't major change at all, so it really does seem like the same pop.
I actually did have Star Wars also listed on my list. So good thing that you also mentioned that. Right in my notes. Yeah, blue box and black box. When you have like two different waves where it was blue box and then they felt, oh, maybe we should re-release these. And then you do it just with the black box. That was kind of pointless. You have the Star Wars celebrations, like you mentioned, but I was going down the route of the fact that they did the singular pops. And then they announced a wave of Star Wars pops that are the exact same pops of those singular ones, except this time with the Star Wars celebration ones, they had a silver base. Now these new common ones, they have a black base. And it's like, did we really need that? No, not necessarily. And yeah, maybe we should have just had the 5-pack for Star Wars Celebration and then make the singular ones for the common set instead of making the common set basically twice over. We've had a couple now of the like deluxe sets for Star Wars. We had the Bounty Hunter collection. There's the Saber series that I'm still trying to collect. And then coming out soon is that new Skiff Deluxe, a part of Return of the Jedi. And even then, it's like pretty much every single character on that is a character that has already been produced as a Funko Pop. So it's like, yeah, did we really need as many pops for like Darth Vader? No. Especially when you get to lineups like Obi-Wan, where you make 5 different pops, and then you got to make the 5-pack. And it's not just Star Wars for that. We just talked about Marvel a bit ago. They're very notorious right now for doing that. So it's just like, yeah, Star Wars, it's getting a little too much to where people who want to try to get the complete set, it's not really doable, especially when you have many different interests. And then I guess because you have nothing left, since I pretty much said everything that you were going to mention, I should have just let you go first, realistically, if that was going to be the case. I guess I'll mention that. So I did already mention about Notorious B.I.G. But then I have Gabriel Iglesias. This was something that we talked about on the previous pod, talking about people that didn't really have much pops, because you mentioned about comedians. So I wanted to bring up Gabriel Iglesias as a person that has way too many pops when you have the OG, the Day of the Dead, and then you have Carrying the Dogs, and then like the blacklight version of that, the stadium versions, the Tapatio Man, the Jack in the Box. There's probably more that I can't think of, but there's just way too many Gabriel Iglesias pops. Bring more for the comedians lineup.
Yeah, I completely agree. Gabriel Iglesias has too many pops. Some of them are kind of interesting, but realistically, we don't need this many versions. Like, what the heck? It really does just seem like a brand deal of sorts to do a Jack in the Box Gabriel Iglesias and like the Tapatio Man one. It's just a way to get another product out there, is what it seems like. Those ones are kind of cool. I'm debating on buying them because I might want them for my ad icons. But to be honest, I got the first Gabriel Iglesias and it came signed by him, and that was good enough. I would have been perfectly happy if there was never another Gabriel Iglesias after that and we just started getting other comedians other than him. So yeah, definitely a great pick for this.
The next one that I have is actually for a video game that I play, and it's actually a video game that MD, finally, after so long trying to convince him to play it again, has started playing. That's Fortnite. Way too many pops. And it's for the reasons that are kind of the opposite of what we hope for in different Funko Pop sets. A lot of times we complain for certain sets, they have too many pops because of them reproducing the same characters over and over again. I'll mention one later, but that's one of the fan picks. And then, like, let's say, for example, yeah, like Deadpool, there's so many of Deadpool. And when it comes to Star Wars, there's too many Darth Vaders. With this, Fortnite, Funko has made pops but a lot of them are different skins, and they haven't really reproduced a lot of different versions of the same characters. There are some they made like maybe 3 max of, like Skull Trooper. They made a couple versions of the Cuddle Team leader, but even like really popular skins, like let's say my favorite skin that I use, my main skin, Tomato Head, has only had 1 pop, when there's been a bunch of different versions of him on the item shop that they could have made pops for, but they didn't, surprisingly. And especially Peely, who was a huge seller when that wave of Fortnite pops came out. And even, I should also, a little bit of a cheap plug, we did do a video on the channel, a little bit of a video essay of why Fortnite Funko Pops failed. There were too many different skins that were made that I feel like not a lot of people cared about, especially when you have the generic ones like the High Rise Assault Trooper or the other Assault Troopers that just don't look cool compared to like the food skins or the animal skins, realistically.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of Fortnite pops, and it makes sense that they made a bunch because, I mean, kids are buying the skins and they're asking for money for the skins. So when they see that pop in the store, they're definitely going to want it. So they're pushing out a bunch of Fortnite pops. But yeah, it has gotten to be a bit too much. And there definitely is some skins that I would love to see in Funko Pop form. I completely forgot that I actually at one point owned the flocked Cuddle Team Trooper. I no longer have that pop though. But yeah, just there's so many. And you're right, there isn't really a bunch of different variations of some of these different skins. It is weird, but I would like to see maybe more, but definitely space it out. You don't need to drop a ton of Fortnite pops all at once. You don't even really need to do it in a set. Maybe just a couple of pops, 3 pops here and there, rather than having sets of, let's say, like 6 or 9 like they had been doing, where there's just too many pops. And yeah, I mean, there's so many skins in Fortnite, but realistically, not every skin needs a Funko Pop.
And then I guess the last one I had written down, and it was what I teased a bit ago about Marvel, Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame have way too many pops. And the problem with this set is that they are still making Avengers Endgame pops today, even though that movie came out in 2019. We're like hitting 5 years pretty much at this point, maybe even longer since that movie came out. And they're still producing pops. So what I wrote down in my notes is that we had that original initial set with all of them, like maybe when the trailer came out and it was before the movie came out. And then they decided to do some of the characters like Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, those same ones, but glow in the dark, and they're part of Pop and T bundles. And then they re-released those commons as Entertainment Earth exclusives, and they made them with trading cards. So it was like, what was really the point of having the normal ones when you can easily get the ones with the cards, or just why make the card ones? I don't know. I just think that was a little bit pointless. I don't know if maybe like those came with the exact same card that the pop is based off of, or they were like mystery cards and you had to buy multiple pops and it was literally such a money grab at that point. And then you have multiples of like same version of characters. So like when you had Tony Stark with the gauntlet, you had that normal one from NYCC, and then they made it better by doing the I Am Iron Man later on. There's 3 versions of the Captain America with the Mjolnir and shield, where there was the original one from the Marvel Collector's Corps subscription box, and then you made the one with like the cool lightning base. And then they just recently released a glow in the dark and metallic version that we actually, I'm pretty sure, just talked about within the last week or so on the podcast. So now there's 3 of that. And then you have that glow in the dark Thor that has a glow in the dark chase, and there's not much difference within the common and the chase. So it's starting to become very pointless pops for the Avengers Endgame lineup when they pretty much nailed the head on what the wave should be. Now it's just, let's see how many more we can come out with the exact same mold. A very unnecessary set of pops, that is Avengers Endgame, at least for what we've gotten recently.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, that goes right along with what I said with Marvel, with the different sets that they have that have too many pops. And yeah, Endgame, there's a ton. I have a few of them. Yeah, I mean, you summed that up pretty well. I mean, there's just a ton of Endgame stuff. It could have ended, no pun intended, a couple of years ago, because at this point, it's just getting to be way too much.
All right, so now we're going to be going to the fan suggestions. Fans had sent in their thoughts on pretty much exactly what they think there are too many pops of, and we're going to agree or disagree on that statement. And there's fans that sent multiple in one posting. So we'll go with each of those one at a time. So the first one we're going to be looking at, I'll actually mention this one first, from Elena Kramer. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. This was from Instagram. Harry Potter. Definitely agree with that. Like we go back to like talking about when we discuss about Star Wars, when there's too many Darth Vaders, there's too many Luke Skywalkers, Princess Leia's and stuff. There's way too many of Harry Potter himself, Ron Weasley himself, Hermione Granger herself. Like they are pumping up a lot. And especially when you have those deluxe moments that are coming out now. And it's just, yeah, there is a lot. And there's still a whole set of different characters that they have not even made pops for yet, but they choose to do a different version of Harry Potter from a scene that no one really talks about instead. So yeah, Harry Potter, a lot of pops in that.
Okay, so the first thing that I have to ask, is Elena Kramer your real name, or are you just a big fan of Seinfeld? Because that's hilarious, Elaine and Kramer. If you're watching this, let us know in the comments, because I definitely need to know. Harry Potter pops, yeah, there's way too many. I don't know how I didn't even think of that when making these lists, because there's so many. I mean, just a ridiculous amount of Harry Potter himself. and Ron and Hermione, I guess. But Harry Potter specifically, there's so many, and I get it. There's a bunch of movies and a bunch of different outfits and things that Harry Potter has done, but there's a lot that are very similar. It's kind of the same with the Mando, that a lot of them aren't too different from another, and for that reason, yeah, it's just too many. And then you have like the Build-A-Sets, and you have the Hogwarts Express, you have Hogwarts itself, you have all these different things. Too many pops.
All right, now we're going to look through the huge list that came from @Bastion Derek, who's usually a regular viewer of this channel. The first one he sent in is WWE. And I mean, I agree, but I disagree at the same time. I agree for the sake of there's a lot of John Cena's, there's a lot of The Rocks. They've been pumping a lot of Stone Cold Steve Austin's, but in the entire set of, I think it's around, I should say, like 120 something. Actually, I have my brand new Rhea Ripley pop right here. She is number 122 in this set. So there has been at least 120 different WWE, or not really different, but 120 different, I guess, kind of pops you can say. I can't really say different because there have been, let's say, multiples and they've taken up different numbers. But the thing about WWE is that, yeah, there's a lot of, let's say, John Cena's in that, but WWE is just kind of a never ending thing to where there's so many new people that come in and there's so many older wrestlers that, like, there's too many, but I think there's too many for a good reason. Like Rhea Ripley finally getting her own pop, like that's awesome. And then, yeah, seeing more John Cena pops, but then when you get those new wrestlers made into pop form, or you get the older ones that have never been made to pop form. I just recently heard a new list of WWE pops that are coming down the pipeline, and there's an older wrestler that is going to be made into pop form soon that I can't wait for it to happen. Pops like that I'm excited for. So I agree, but I disagree at the same time with WWE.
Yeah, I think I disagree on this one. I mean, there's not a ton of different wrestlers that have multiple pops, so I don't think that's too big of an issue. There is a lot of WWE pops, but at the same time, I don't think there's enough. I mean, we're always going to be looking for another wrestler to be getting a Funko Pop. So yeah, I have to disagree with this one.
My Hero Academia. Kind of agree, but once again, I kind of disagree again. I mean, I agree because, yeah, you got a lot of, in this case, it would be All Mights and Dekus. But I have been noticing them making some kind of obscure characters as of late that are very new, especially with the new 1B class set that's exclusive to Hot Topic. This one's very difficult. There is a lot of pops. Yes, I do agree. There are a lot of pops, but I feel like it's not even as close to being angry about a lot of pops as Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, so My Hero Academia was a set that I debated putting on this list, but I don't think it's quite there yet. I think maybe in, let's say, like 2 years from now, maybe it might get to that point where there's too many, because we do see My Hero Academia releases all the time. It feels like almost every podcast we're talking about at least one My Hero Academia pop, normally multiple, but they're pretty good looking. They look great. They're generally different characters or significant changes to a character. So yeah, I disagree, but like I said, maybe down the road, I might have to agree with that, but that is still going to take some time.
Disney. So with Disney, yes, there's a lot of Disney pops when you think about it overall, but there's such a huge world of Disney that I feel like just saying Disney in general, yes, that's just kind of like an automatic, I guess, cheap shot to it because there are a ton of Disney pops. Like they even reached like number 1,000 recently. But depending on what you specifically say of Disney is where I'm going to agree or disagree. Like for me, like if you said Toy Story, I mean, yes and no, because I could never get enough Toy Story pops. But if you said the Disney Ultimate Princess set, I would totally agree that there's just way too many pops and that it's very unnecessary. So once again, it's one of those agree to disagree kind of situations.
Yeah, again, this is one that I debated putting on the list, mostly with the Disney Ultimate Princess lineup. But I thought about it and I felt like, yeah, there's pops that we don't like from Disney or Disney princesses, but there's not really a ton when you look at the grand scheme of it. It's Disney. I mean, it's a massive property. I mean, there's so much with Disney. I think that we're always going to be getting new Disney Funko Pops as long as Funko's around because they're going to sell. It's Disney. I mean, come on.
And then the last one for Bash and Derek is One Piece. So there is a lot of pops in this set, but it's a lot of pops that are just happening. Like I remember the OG wave, there was like 6 pops, but then everyone's got to remember there was like a huge break of them not making One Piece pops until recently, where yes, within the last year or so, we have been getting a lot of One Piece pops and we have been getting them pretty much every Comic-Con within the last year. But it's one of those sets, especially because of how amazingly detailed. They're probably the most detailed anime pops that are being produced by Funko right now. So if the case is that you're going to get pops as detailed as they are right now going forward, I don't mind them making an abundance of One Piece pops.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many One Piece pops. Like you said, I remember going to different Comic Cons and seeing the original wave back in the day. That was it. That was all the pops for One Piece. And then we finally got more One Piece pops. And yeah, there has been a bunch of announcements for One Piece pops recently, but people have been eating it up. I mean, they're so great, and people have been wanting One Piece pops. And a lot of people highly regard One Piece as their favorite anime, so it makes sense that we're getting a bunch of One Piece pops. And there's not really a ton of the same character that has a ton of pops. I mean, Luffy has a few, but it's not really anything crazy. And yeah, like these pops are just so detailed and they look great. I think that Funko is going to keep making them until maybe one day we decide, yeah, this is too many now.
And then the last one comes from our good buddy at Pops and Props, Pat Caro, The Office. And then you put in brackets, too many exclusives and not enough varieties of other characters. Now, this one I didn't want to put on my list because I kind of figured someone was going to suggest this. And this is a set that I complete almost the entire set of. I'm only like 7 pops away of completing the set, and I will keep continuing to buy it because I'm determined to get a complete set of The Office. And yeah, I will agree 100%. Too many pops, especially when at least half your set consists of just Dwight, Michael, and Jim. Wish there was more characters like Gabe that haven't been made, or like a Robert California, or some other character that would be really cool to be made into pop form, but we haven't, instead of even recently getting our, I believe, 2nd or 3rd Kelly Kapoor pop, which I don't really care about that character all that much. But at the same time, Michael, Jim, and Dwight have made probably the most moments in The Office, so it makes sense for them to get an abundance of Funko Pops. And yeah, there have been too many exclusives, but at the same time, there have been a lot of commons. I will say, yeah, there is a lot of Office Pops. It has been overwhelming for me to try to complete that set.
It's crazy for me to think that just a few years ago, we were like praying and hoping for Office Pops to happen. And now we're saying, yeah, there's too many Office Pops. And that's kind of one thing that kind of scared me away from collecting it. I was collecting it pretty decently when it first came out. And then you're getting all these different variants, and the exclusives are fine. I don't think there's too many exclusives, but just different variants of some characters that you don't really, let's say you don't really want this variant of a character. Yeah, it's too much. And I think very soon the pool of characters that you can make is going to run dry, and there's not going to be a lot that Funko can really do with the Office anymore, besides doing like making the Office itself with, like, let's say each person's desk that you can connect together, something like that, because yeah, there's way too many pops at this point.
Anyways, guys, that is going to be the end of this week's edition of a Funko Popcast. If you enjoyed this edition of a Funko Popcast, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what sets you think have too many pops, ones that we haven't listed yet, and we'll hope to see you guys on another edition of a Funko Popcast. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
That's a whole lot of Funko Pops.
Peace in, peace out.